Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh and a very good day I bid to all. My name is Dafina Binti Nadzri, student ID 20246332252, and today I will be presenting one case of law in cybersecurity, public prosecutor versus Wang Jianchuan. This assignment is prepared for Professor Madya, Dr. Haji Muhammad Shahnawi. So without further ado, let's look at the facts of the case. On 9 August 2021, the police had conducted a raid at a residential house in Kajang, where nine Malaysians and two Chinese nationals were arrested. Among them was the accused Wang Jianchuan. These detainees were suspected of being involved in love scam activities, with the primary targets being Chinese nationals. Now, to clarify, a love scam is also known as a romance scam or online dating scam. It is a common type of online fraud and cybercrime that has only been increasing day by day. In this scam, criminals exploit victims' emotions to extort money from them or sensitive information. The modus operandi employed by the group was sextortion. Firstly, they would contact and communicate with victims online. One arrestee, Lim Lie Fei, secretly recorded video calls without the victim's knowledge and lured them into exposing their private parts. These recordings were later used to blackmail victims for money. So if the victims refused to pay, the videos were threatened to be exposed to their families. So in this case, Wang Jianchuan was charged with criminal conspiracy under sections 120B2, 34, and 420 of the Penal Code, to which he pleaded guilty. Now, through his legal counsel, Wang Zhenchuan applied for a stay of execution, which means a temporary halt on the punishment while his appeal was considered. However, the court had turned down this application. Furthermore, the police have seized about 1,500 ringgit in cash, one unit of Asus laptop, 62 cell phones, one exercise book containing scam scripts, and a few house keys. So, from the modus operandi and the seizure of the tools, we can see how organized the nature of the scam operation really is. Now, let's move on to the issues of the case. From a cybersecurity perspective, the case raises several important issues. Firstly, the accused's role in an online love scam. The court had to consider whether the accused were criminally responsible for his part in the online scam. This is important because cybercrimes often involve multiple actors and they could be working remotely. Secondly, public interest over personal mitigation. Courts often balance the public's interest in justice against individual mitigating factors such as age, background, or remorse. In this case, Wang Zhenchuan's mitigating factor was that he was a first time offender. So the question here was whether public interest should be prioritized over the accused mitigating factors when the court decides this decision. So, next is the court's view on increasing cybersecurity issues. So, since crimes and fraud are becoming more widespread, the court had to consider if this trend justified the court's decision for a stronger punishment. And lastly, the rejection of requests to delay sentence. The final question was whether a stay of execution should be granted while the accused pursued an appeal. Now let's move on to the judgment of the case. So the court had decided and found Wang Zhenchuan guilty and sentenced him to 1 month of imprisonment effective from the date of arrest, a total of 8,000 ringgit of fine, and 2 months imprisonment in default of payment. Additionally, the request for a stay of execution was rejected. This shows the court's emphasis on the timely enforcement of the law, especially for cases such as online fraud, which can cause further harm to victims. Now, let's look at the analysis and critique on the court's judgment. Firstly, Wang Jianchuan was charged with criminal conspiracy to commit fraud under Section 120B2, read with Section 34, and contrary to Section 420 of the Penal Code. So, since he pleaded guilty, a full trial was not necessary. And this is consistent with Malaysia's legal procedures, which allows courts to expedite cases when the accused has to admit their wrongdoings. Furthermore, according to the case, there are four main principles of sentencing that can be considered. They are deterrence, rehabilitation, prevention, and retribution. In this case, the court has specifically emphasized three of these principles, which are retribution, deterrence, and prevention. So, firstly, retribution demands that the sentence reflects society's revulsion towards the crime. So, for example, The sentence of 1 month imprisonment and 8,000 ringgit of fine reflects society's condemnation. The court had explicitly described the offense as horrendous, inhuman, gross, and short of dignity, and the court has also rejected the fine only sentence, which asserts that the guilty cannot simply buy their way out of prison. The next principle would be deterrence. Deterrence aims to prevent the offender from committing future crimes and to warn potential offenders for doing so. So, for example, the court has taken judicial notice of the widespread occurrence of online scams in Malaysia while citing statistics of the highest reported incident being online fraud. The imprisonment and fine serve as a warning to both the accused and the public that which reinforces that online scams carry serious consequences. And the final principle would be prevention. Prevention seeks to physically or legally prevent offenders from committing further crimes. So, for example, Wang Jianchuan was sentenced to a month of imprisonment to prevent him from committing crimes any further. So, being a foreign national, imprisonment may lead to deportation, which further halts the criminal activity, and also the confiscation of the laptop and mobile phones has effectively disrupted the scam operation entirely. Now, let's move on to the analysis and critique from a cybersecurity perspective. I would like to highlight three key observations that I've discovered upon studying this case. Firstly, lack of user security awareness. The scam used social engineering and not hacking. Social engineering, according to IBM 2022, manipulates individuals into revealing sensitive information. So, both the court and the public need to exercise caution in sharing private data online, as criminals can exploit their personal privacy and trust. Secondly, I have discovered that the sentence does not really reflect globalized cybercrime. This was a cross-border crime. The sentence of 1 month imprisonment plus a fine may not strongly deter international criminal groups. A research by Abdul Halek and Ashraf 2023 highlights that cybercrimes are much harder to trace than traditional crimes because data can be deleted, altered, or moved across borders, and the perpetrators often remain anonymous. And finally, I have discovered that there is a critical need for updated legislation on cybercrimes. The law used, Section 420 of the Penal Code, to charge Wang Jianchuan is a general law originally designed for traditional fraud. I have observed that the reliance on general laws can result in penalties that don't match the severity of modern digital crimes. Although Malaysia has recently introduced Cybersecurity Act 2024 and Online Safety Act 2024, this case highlights the challenge of ensuring prosecutors that have specific laws to charge online criminals properly. So, to conclude, this case highlights a few important points. First, online scams are a growing threat worldwide. Scammers are becoming more sophisticated, and their crimes can affect anyone and anywhere. And secondly, even though the court balanced deterrence, retribution, and prevention, modern cybercrimes need much more specific laws. Traditional laws may not fully match the seriousness of these digital crimes. And finally, we need a combined approach to fight cybercrime, which are increasing user awareness, create clear laws for online crimes, and also work together globally to fight cybercrime. So, that concludes my presentation, and these are my references. Thank you so much for your time.